It began with a voicemail. A raspy voice, unfamiliar and breathless, left a single sentence. "They're not who they used to be." Thomas Wilkes played it back 3 times, each replay pressing a deeper frown into his aging forehead. He hadn't spoken to anyone from his hometown in over a decade. What made it stranger was the number. It had no caller ID, no traceable digits. Just a ghostly echo that clung to his ears long after the message ended. Tom had built a comfortable life in Chicago. Suburban house, a stable job in insurance, weekend barbecues with neighbors who rarely pried. But that voice scratched at something buried in him. It unearthed an image of old brick streets, yellowing trees, and a memory he hadn't allowed himself to revisit since he left Larkfield 20 years ago. That night, unable to sleep, he poured a glass of whiskey and stared at his childhood photo. He and his twin brother Daniel, arm in arm, standing in front of the old house. Daniel, who'd stopped calling 15 years ago. Daniel, who had never left Larkfield. Tom drove down 2 days later, telling his wife it was just a nostalgic trip. The town hadn't changed much. Same silent sidewalks, same leaning fences, same eerie absence of children playing in yards. Yet something was wrong. People stared too long, too still. Faces he remembered now had an odd blankness behind their smiles, like they were performing normalcy without fully understanding it. He found Daniel's house untouched by time. The lawn was too neat, the bushes unnaturally trimmed. He knocked, heart pounding. When the door opened, Tom's breath caught. Daniel stood there, same dark eyes, same smirk, but his face was stretched just slightly wrong, a fraction too tight, as if someone had worn his brother like a costume. "Tommy," Daniel greeted. "You finally came back." They sat in the kitchen that night, but the conversation was hollow. Daniel remembered too much and too little at the same time. His laugh came too late. His expressions were forced, mismatched with his words. Tom excused himself and went to the bathroom, noticing as he passed the living room that Daniel had no family photos, just one massive portrait of himself, eyes black as coal. Inside the bathroom, Tom noticed something far more disturbing. The mirror was covered entirely with a sheet. Curiosity overruled caution. He pulled it aside and froze. His reflection looked fine, but behind him, Daniel stood silently in the hallway, unblinking, grinning ear to ear. Only, when Tom turned around, no one was there. That night, Tom barely slept. In the morning, he insisted they go visit their childhood home. Daniel agreed too quickly. The house was abandoned now, but Daniel somehow had the key. Dust coated everything. The air was thick, stale with memories. But when they entered their old bedroom, Tom noticed something chilling. In the middle of the floor sat a small pile of children's teeth, perfectly arranged in a circle. Daniel didn't seem surprised. "Do you remember the rules?" he asked. "What rules?" Tom replied, uneasy. Daniel's voice shifted deeper, unnatural. "Don't run. Don't look into the mirror. And never question what you've become." Tom's vision blurred. His limbs felt distant. The house seemed to breathe around him, pulsing with some invisible rhythm. He turned, trying to leave, but the hallway stretched impossibly long. Daniel followed without footsteps, his mouth widening unnaturally. "They replaced us long ago, brother. Don't you see? You're not really here. You came back to remember what you were." Tom stumbled outside, gasping for air, heart racing. The town watched silently. Every face he passed now looked identical. The same eyes, The same smile, as if the entire town wore one face, just slightly adjusted per resident. No one blinked. Desperate, Tom went to the old church. The priest was gone. The chapel was empty save for a mirror above the altar. As he approached, the glass rippled. His reflection stepped forward on its own and whispered, "We took your place the day you left. You've just been wearing his skin." He touched the mirror. Pain shot through him. His hands, no longer hands, were stretching, bones elongating, face contorting. He screamed, but no sound came. Behind him, the townsfolk gathered, eyes shining in unison, chanting in a guttural tongue. Tom awoke in the middle of the street, clean, calm, back in Chicago, or so it seemed. His wife greeted him with an empty smile. The house looked the same, but every photo showed only him, never his wife, never his children. That night, he opened the bathroom mirror again. Inside it, the real Tom Wilkes banged his fists silently, trapped. His reflection smiled and whispered, "Shh, you'll get used to it. We all do." The days blurred into each other. Tom's body moved on autopilot, working, eating, sleeping, but his mind screamed from within. Sometimes he saw flashes of his real self in windows or puddles. Each time, his reflection looked more ragged, desperate, banging harder, trying to be noticed. Once, he smashed every mirror in the house, hoping to sever the connection, but the next morning, they had all returned, spotless and intact. His wife calmly vacuumed up the shards with a lifeless smile. "They always come back," she said flatly, not even glancing at him. Tom tried to leave the city, driving aimlessly toward nowhere, but every road looped back. The gas never depleted. Time folded in on itself. At one point, he stopped at a gas station miles away, only to find the same clerk from Larkfield behind the counter, wearing the same wrong smile. That night, Tom sat in his car and whispered to the void, "If you hear me, if anyone's left in there, please help me." A voice responded from the radio, crackling like it came from beneath the ground. "You're not alone, but you're not you anymore." It all began on a rainy Thursday evening, the kind where the sky feels lower than usual and everything is soaked in a dull grey. Mark Ellison was on his way back home after a long shift at the printing company. He took the same shortcut through Westbrook Alley as he had for the past 12 years. The alley was narrow, a bit claustrophobic, with cracked brick walls on either side, and the faint smell of mould and damp concrete. As he walked, something made him stop. A man stood ahead, under the flickering light of a broken street lamp. Mark squinted. The man was familiar, very familiar. It was him, or rather, someone who looked exactly like him. Same leather jacket, same haircut, even the same frown lines carved deeply into his brow. The man simply smiled and turned into the next street without a word. Mark's heart skipped. He stood frozen. "That's not possible," he muttered, but the image burned itself into his mind. The next few days were tense. Mark couldn't shake the image. He tried telling his wife Dana, but her laughter was immediate. "You're stressed, hun. Probably saw your reflection in a puddle or a window," she said. But Mark knew better. The face wasn't in a reflection. It had looked back at him. It smiled. He started noticing strange things. At the grocery store, someone waved at him, calling him Danny. At the gas station, the clerk handed him change and said, "You just left 5 minutes ago." His sense of identity began to warp. It was like someone else was living his life in brief, scattered moments. Dana brushed it off, but Mark knew something was wrong. Something was changing. He became obsessed. He set up a camera facing the alley from his upstairs window, watched it every night. On the third night, he saw it. Himself again. Only this time, the man looked a little off. The eyes were colder. The walk wasn't quite right. He rewound the footage again and again until dawn, his mouth dry, fingers trembling. The man was identical, but lacked something human. Dana was growing concerned. "You're scaring me, Mark. You haven't slept. You keep recording shadows." Mark tried to explain. "I'm being replaced." She backed away, blinking slowly. "What?" He couldn't blame her. He sounded insane. But deep inside, he felt it. An erosion, like something was scraping at the edges of his reality, slowly pushing him out. One morning, Mark woke up in a hospital bed. Dana sat nearby, eyes red from crying. "You collapsed in the street. You've been out for 2 days," she whispered. Mark stared at her. "Where's the other me?" Dana flinched. "Mark, please stop." But he couldn't. He got up, too quickly, and stumbled toward the mirror above the sink. The reflection stared back. It looked like him, but slightly younger. The scar on his chin was gone. His teeth looked different. He screamed. Dana called for a nurse. 2 orderlies restrained him, but he knew that thing was winning, taking over. They diagnosed him with paranoid delusions, suggested he stay for observation. Mark played along, silently watching. The nurses sometimes called him Mr. Dean instead of Ellison. A man visited once, stared at him silently through the door window, then walked away. He looked like Mark, again, but wore a suit and carried a cane. He wasn't sure how long he had left. Every time he woke up, he felt a little less anchored. His memories flickered. Sometimes he remembered being at a beach house he never owned, or hearing a child laugh. He never had kids. Someone was layering memories over his. Mark kept a journal, pages filled with frantic notes, dates, drawings of faces. His face, slightly altered each time. Late one night, a nurse forgot to lock his room. Mark slipped out, barefoot, the hospital gown flapping as he hurried down the hall. He had one place to go, Westbrook Alley. Rain pounded the streets, just like that first night. And sure enough, under the same flickering lamp, he was there. This time, the figure didn't walk away. He turned and faced Mark fully. "You're not needed anymore," he said in Mark's exact voice. Mark charged at him, fists flying, but hit only air. The figure dissolved into a misty silhouette and vanished into the rain. Mark fell to his knees, soaked, sobbing, the sense of self slipping from him like sand through his fingers. In the puddle beside him, his reflection was gone. Not warped, not unclear, gone. They found him the next morning, muttering in the alley, unresponsive. Dana came to see him, but didn't recognize the man in the bed. "That's not my husband," she whispered to the nurse. The man smiled silently. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just sat and watched, as if learning how to be human. The doctors renamed him John Doe. The real Mark Ellison's records were archived, forgotten. Somewhere, someone else was living Mark's life, with his voice, his walk, his memories. Only now, the original Mark had no name, no place, no identity, just whispers in his head, trying to remember who he used to be. "Mark, if that was still his name, sat alone in a white room, staring at the wall. He was given books, toys, puzzles. None made sense. He saw colours that didn't exist, heard names that felt familiar but meant nothing. Once he said Dana aloud, and the nurse smiled like it was progress. But it felt like a betrayal. That name belonged to his life, not this one. On his 5th week, he was handed a mirror. For a moment, he hesitated. Then slowly, he raised it to his face. A stranger stared back. Darker hair, a different nose, new eyes. His hand trembled. "Who am I?" he whispered. The nurse said, "You're healing." But he knew he was not. Meanwhile, at the Ellison household, the new Mark thrived. He fixed the leaky sink. He played chess with Dana. He laughed more, worked harder. He even joined a neighborhood watch. People commented on how youthful he seemed lately, how much better he looked. Dana blushed every time someone mentioned it. In their bedroom, Dana once asked, "Do you ever feel like you've changed?" He smiled. "Isn't that a good thing?" She nodded, smiling back. But at night, as he stared into the mirror, he'd touch his face slowly, almost curiously, like he was still learning what it meant to be Mark Ellison. Back in the hospital, Mark's mind had splintered. He no longer wrote in the journal, just scratched symbols into the wall with a spoon. Sometimes he muttered in a voice that wasn't his. Sometimes he laughed, then screamed. The staff treated him like any patient. They called him John, said he was making progress, but he wasn't. One evening, a young intern watched him through the glass. "He looks exactly like my uncle," she whispered. The senior nurse nodded. "Funny. Every now and then, someone says that." The intern leaned in. "What's his story?" The nurse paused, then replied, "He says he used to be someone else. We all do, I suppose." It started with a phone call, a regular Tuesday evening just after dinner. Martin had barely finished rinsing his plate when his landline rang, a sound he barely heard anymore in the era of smartphones. Something about the tone made him freeze. It wasn't urgent, not on the surface. It was his childhood friend, Alan, calling after years of silence. "Hey Marty, you got a moment? It's about Ted," Alan said, his voice gravelly and unsure. Ted was their old high school buddy. Martin hadn't seen him in over a decade, maybe longer. Alan continued before Martin could respond. "I think something's wrong with him. Really wrong. He's not himself. He lives out near Deer Hollow now. You should come. Please. Just for a day." Martin didn't owe Alan much. They drifted apart, but something in his voice, a quiet panic wrapped in shame, dug under Martin's skin. By morning, he was on the road. Deer Hollow was smaller than Martin remembered, a town that looked like it had been left behind. Cracked sidewalks, faded signs, and that strange silence only small towns seemed to hold, like everything was waiting. Ted's house was at the edge, near a patch of woods too dense for light. Alan greeted him with a quick nod, eyes bloodshot. "He's in the back, sleeps most of the day, barely eats, keeps scratching at himself. You'll see." Martin stepped into the musty hallway and immediately sensed it. Something foul in the air, not just rot. Something deeper, a wrongness. In the bedroom, Ted lay curled beneath thin sheets, eyes wide open and vacant. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and the room reeked of sweat, earth, and something metallic. "Ted?" Martin asked softly. Ted blinked, then slowly turned, his lips cracked open. "It's under me. It wants to come out." Ted's ramblings that evening made Martin's stomach churn. He talked about a change, a skin that no longer fit, something inside shifting, pulling, growing. He scratched until he bled, insisting he could feel it trying to push through his bones. Alan stood by the window, arms crossed. He started with nightmares, said he saw himself in mirrors doing things he wasn't doing. Then came the sounds, like whispering from the woods. Martin didn't know what to make of it. Was it psychosis, a breakdown, or something darker? That night, they both took turns keeping watch. Around 3 a.m., Ted bolted upright, screaming, "It's inside! You hear it, don't you? In the walls." They calmed him down, barely. Martin couldn't sleep after that. The house creaked with unnatural rhythm, and sometimes it sounded like breathing. The next morning, Martin noticed deep scratches along the hallway wall. Long, uneven grooves like claws. Alan swore they hadn't been there yesterday. Ted had barely moved. At least that's what they thought. They tried to get him help, but the local doctor refused to come. "If he's changing, you need to leave," the man muttered before slamming his door. Martin was baffled. Changing? It wasn't just Ted acting strange. It was the whole town. People avoided eye contact. Whispers trailed behind them. And when Martin asked about Deer Hollow's history, Alan only said one thing. People go into those woods sometimes, and they come back wrong. That night, Martin decided to investigate. He went into the woods behind Ted's house. The air was colder there, unnaturally still. After only a few steps, he began to feel it too, a pulsing sensation beneath his own skin. Something ancient seemed to linger in the shadows, humming. He found symbols carved into trees, circles, eyes, spines, and worse, clumps of what looked like shed human skin, half buried in moss. Running back, he found Ted missing. Alan stood in the hallway, frozen. "He's in the basement." Martin descended slowly, each step heavier than the last. The air was damp, thick, alive. Ted stood in the center, shirtless, body covered in fresh wounds. "It's almost done," he whispered. In a blur, Ted's body convulsed. Bones shifted audibly, skin stretched and tore in some places. But what came out wasn't a monster, not in the classic sense. It was still Ted. His eyes, his smile, but wrong, smoother, empty, as if someone had rebuilt him, removing all the human parts. Alan collapsed. Martin stood, paralyzed. Ted stepped closer. "Do you feel it too? You were in the woods. It's inside you now." Martin couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. A heat began rising in his chest, a buzzing in his teeth. For a second, he saw his own hands twist unnaturally, the fingers stretching. He left that night, drove without stopping, didn't even look back when Alan screamed behind him. He couldn't. Back home, weeks passed. Then came the dreams, the pulsing beneath his skin, the sense of something watching him through mirrors, and the scratching, always the scratching. One morning, he woke up with blood beneath his nails, his sheets shredded. In the bathroom mirror, His reflection smiled back a second longer than it should have. Martin stopped going outside. Light hurt his eyes now. Food made him nauseous. Something inside was waking up, and it had memories, not his own. He'd catch glimpses in reflections, of trees he'd never seen, of a forest at night, lit by flickering torches and chanting figures. His neighbours grew wary. Someone knocked on his door one evening, and he didn't answer. He could hear their heartbeat from the hallway. Loud, tempting. The thing inside him wanted to peel them open and crawl inside. He screamed until dawn. One final night, he couldn't fight it anymore. Something peeled through. Not like a second skin, more like a shedding. His bones cracked. He felt his body rearrange, nerves fray, skin ripple like waves beneath heat. He emerged from the bathroom covered in sweat, shaking, but nothing visible had changed. Yet in the mirror, the other him stood behind the glass, smiling. This version blinked out of sync, and when it tilted its head, Martin's neck moved with it. That morning, he received a letter, no return address, just a single phrase in crude handwriting: "Dear Hollow waits."